And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I'm your host, Demo, and I lied. I said that I was done with Strixhaven and C21, but I'm not quite done yet. I got one more deck, and that is my Dragon's Approach deck. That's right. This is a deck that is not built around any particular commander from Strixhaven. It's built around a card from Strixhaven, and I just thought this absolutely needed to get some attention from me because it is so unique. So for anyone who hasn't seen the card, Dragon's Approach, 2 and a red sorcery. Dragon's Approach deals 3 damage to each opponent. That's not bad. Okay, so 3 damage to each opponent, that's not nothing. So let's keep that in mind. But you may exile Dragon's Approach and 4 cards named Dragon's Approach from your graveyard. If you do, search your library for a dragon creature card and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. But the most important part of this card, obviously for commander players, is a deck can have any number of cards named Dragon's Approach. So anyone who's built a Persistent Petitioners or Relentless Rats deck, anything like that, there's a few cards in the format where you can build around that one card and you can have more than one in your deck, right? So I thought this is definitely worth giving a build around, and I went a different direction with this, a little bit of a different direction. You know, this is such a unique card because it is the first ever sorcery that is like this, right? Every other card that we've ever seen like this is a creature. So this is the first kind of deck that you could build in Commander that you can do this with a sorcery, which makes it to me very unique. And I went more with the direction of, I have a card that I can have any number of in my deck. And also I'm dealing 3 damage to each opponent. I actually didn't go with the Dragon Search part nearly as much. This isn't a dragon themed deck at all. I know when people see this, they think, oh, I'm going to make a dragon tribal deck. No, you're not going to make a dragon tribal deck because you need to fill your deck with Dragon's Approach. And if you fill your deck with Dragon's Approach, you can't fill your deck with dragons, right? I don't even have a dragon commander for this deck, okay? And the commander for this deck is actually Jorian Runediver. And I picked Jorian Runediver because I wanted Izzet colors, right? So I decided to go Izzet colors with this deck. And I also chose Jorian because I'm going to be casting my second spell each turn quite a bit, so I liked the card advantage there. So I thought that was a good fit. This is not a dragon deck. This is an instant and sorcery deck, right? We have 36 Dragon's Approaches in this deck. This is an instant and sorcery deck, right? So I thought an Izzet instant and sorcery commander would really be the way to go. I like Jorian just because of the card draw. You could go with another Izzet sort of instant and sorcery commander. And I know people will say, where's Niv Mizzet? Isn't that the perfect one for this deck? No, it's not, because Niv Mizzet we want in the 99, right? I don't want that as my commander. I want to be able to go get it out of my deck and put it into play. So if it's in the command zone, that's no good. That doesn't work. So get it out of your head that this is a dragon deck. It's not, okay? If I'm going to put 36 sorceries in my deck, it's not going to be a dragon deck. It's just not, okay? You can put a few in there, but it's not going to be a dragon tribal deck. A Dragon's Approach deck is an instant and sorcery theme or a Spellslinger's theme. I do have a few. Like I said, I got Niv Mizzet. I also put Tyrant's Familiar in there. You know, it's just a good card to go grab. It has haste. It can attack right away, deals 7 damage to target creature because our commander most likely will be out. So it's removal. I like that a lot. That's it. 2 dragons in this deck. That is all we're getting. You know, you're not going to be using that ability that much, right? I mean, think about it. You have to exile 4 other cards named Dragon's Approach from your graveyard. That means you have to have 4 in there and cast the 5th one. So you're casting the 5th one and exiling 4 more. How many times do you think you're going to do that in a game? Maybe once, maybe twice, right? However, I am going to take advantage of that ability as well. More what I wanted to do with this deck, and I did originally go with the more I'm going to search up dragons theme, and I thought, yeah, that just doesn't work, I don't think, because you're only going to be doing it once or twice in a game, and you have so many Dragon's Approach cards in your deck that doesn't leave room for a ton of other things. I really like taking advantage of the fact that we have cards with the same name in our deck. That's something you don't see in Commander very often. So Pyromancer's Ascension and Harness the Storm are going to be fantastic in this deck, right? Pyromancer's Ascension, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that has the same name as a card in your graveyard, you put a quest counter on it. Well, that's going to be pretty darn easy, right? And then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, while Pyromancer's Ascension has 2 or more counters on it, you copy the spell, right? So we're going to be getting 2 counters on this really darn quick, And remember, our Dragon's Approach is dealing 3 damage to each opponent, right? So this becomes, I cast a Dragon's Approach, get a copy, now I'm dealing 6 damage to each of my opponents. That's probably going to be more the win con in this deck, rather than I throw a huge dragon creature into play and kill my opponents with it. It's going to be, we're going to kill our opponents with our Dragon's Approach. That's how we're going to win. That's the win con in this deck. Harness the Storm, same thing. We cast our Dragon's Approach from our hand, and we can cast a card with the same name as that spell from our graveyard, which we're going to have lots of Dragon's Approaches in our graveyard, obviously, right? You have to pay the mana for it, but this can just be, I cast Dragon's Approach, I get to cast another one from my graveyard. Again, I'm doing double damage. If we have our Pyromancer's Ascension in play, we're going to get a copy of both because we're casting both, right? This can really close out the game fast. Spellweaver Helix and Thrumming Stone. Again, it's going to be taking advantage. I'm playing on the same name theme here, right? Thrumming Stone is fantastic in any deck where you have, again, like the Relentless Rats or any of those decks where you have a ton of cards with the same name, because it gives all your spells Ripple 4, right? And for anyone who doesn't know what Ripple 4 is, which probably most people don't, it's a very unknown mechanic from Cold Snap. Whenever you cast a spell, you may reveal the top 4 cards of your library, right? That's where the Ripple 4 part comes in. You may cast any revealed cards with the same name as that spell without paying their mana cost, and put the rest on the bottom of your library. So you can just win the game. Okay, in this deck, like a lot of people will put this with their Relentless Rats and they'll be able to get like 50 Relentless Rats in play, but then they got to wait a whole turn before they can attack and they're susceptible to board wipes. This can just win you the game with Dragon's Approach, because when we look at the top 4, we take a Dragon's Approach and then we can cast it. And when we cast it, it has Ripple 4 and triggers our Thrumming Stone again. And this is not even including any of the other effects we have in play, like Pyromancer's Ascension or whatever else we might have. This is just, I cast a Dragon's Approach, and if I can hit one again in the top 4, I cast it, and you just keep repeating that, right? And if you can keep getting a Dragon's Approach every time you look at that top 4, you just kill all your opponents and you win. Spellweaver Helix is going to be another one of these copy. Again, another card that is completely useless in Commander typically, right? When Spellweaver Helix enters the battlefield, you may exile 2 target sorcery cards from a single graveyard. Whenever a player casts a card, if it has the same name as one of the exiled cards, you can copy it. If you do, you may cast a copy without paying its mana cost. So same name thing doesn't work very well in Commander typically, right? But in this deck, it works great. What we're going to do with this is we're going to exile 2 Dragon's Approaches, right? We don't love the fact that it's exiling the Dragon's Approaches from our graveyard because we want them in our graveyard, but I think getting that free copy every time is worth it. And then Locket of Yesterdays. I mean, this is just, again, another card that is typically going to be completely useless in a Commander game. Spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card with the same name as that spell in your graveyard. So this is just going to be fantastic in the deck, right? Because our Dragon's Approaches are going to cost 1 less unless we have 2 in the graveyard. Once we have 2 in the graveyard, right? Because it's for each. So once we have 2 Dragon's Approaches in our graveyard, all of our Dragon's Approaches only cost 1 red mana. Pretty fantastic. So we definitely want that card. I even put Trinket Mage in the deck so we can go get it, because it's just really going to be great in this deck. And then of course we want to fill our graveyard, right? Frantic Search, Windfall. We want to be filling our graveyard a little bit. We don't want to fill our graveyard too much. We actually want to cast the Dragon's Approaches. We are going to win typically by just dealing damage to our opponents with them. So we want like a couple of Dragon's Approaches in our graveyard though, because a lot of these effects want us to be having them in our graveyard. We also want to be bumping up the damage that we're dealing, right? So Torbrand and Fire Servant are both going to be fantastic in the deck. Torbrand, every time we cast a Dragon's Approach, we're going to be dealing 5 damage with it instead of 3. Fire Servant, if a red instant or sorcery spell you control would deal damage, it deals double that damage instead. So this guy is going to deal 6 with our Dragon's Approaches. That's going to close out the game a lot faster. And then I found a card that is absolutely perfect in the deck. That this is the reason why I decided on Izzet Colors. Sphinx of the Chimes. Again, another card that probably no one has ever seen in a Commander game before, because it just doesn't work until now. 6 mana, 4 blue Sphinx. Flying, 5/6. Discard 2 non-land cards with the same name. draw 4 cards. So again, same name thing doesn't really work in Commander, but in this deck it's fantastic. So what we can do is we can discard 2 Dragon's Approaches, draw 4 cards. And then if we can draw 2 more of those Dragon's Approaches, we can keep doing this, right? And again, we're discarding the Dragon's Approaches, which we want. We want them in our graveyard. So we can keep pitching them into our graveyard, draw 4 cards. If we can get 2 more Dragon's Approaches in our hands from those 4, we can pitch them, do it again, and our hand keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It plays into the theme of having Dragon's Approach in our graveyard. All those other cards like Harness the Storm and Pyromancer's Ascension that want cards in our graveyard, it's going to be great for as well. It's so good in the deck that I also decided why not put Arcane Adaptation and Maskwood Nexus in the deck as well. So now we can make all of our cards in our library into dragon cards, right? Arcane Adaptation is going to make all of our cards into a certain creature type, which we're going to make dragon. Maskwood Nexus is going to make all of our stuff into every creature type, which includes dragon. So now what we can do with Dragon's Approach is all of our creatures we can now go get with dragon. This is another way you can go with this if you want to. I just added it in, but you can make a whole deck this way if you want to with Maskwood Nexus and Arcane Adaptation. And there are other cards that do it as well, where you can just make all your stuff into dragons so that you can then go get any creature out of your deck with Dragon's Approach if you want. I just did it so that we can go get our Sphinx of the Chimes because that's such a great card in the deck. We can also just go get our Fire Servant and put that into play. Any of the creatures, Torbran, whatever the case may be. This deck really can get out of hand fast. If your opponents don't see it coming, and I haven't seen any Dragon's Approach decks out in the wild yet, so I don't know what sort of the mentality is here. I've playtested this deck a few times and it can get out of hand real fast. If you start getting your Spellweaver Helix, your Pyromancer's Ascension in play, and then I go get my Niv Mizzet out of my deck, put it into play. Now every single time I cast a Dragon's Approach, I get to draw a card, deal a damage, get your Sphinx of the Chimes in play as well, right? So now I pitch 2 of my Dragon's Approaches, draw 4 cards. My Niv Mizzet triggers 4 times because I'm drawing 4 cards, so I get 4 pings with it. There's just such great synergy with this deck. Like I said, I went away from the search my deck for a dragon card. I think that really draws people in. I went more towards let's take advantage of the fact that we have a whole bunch of cards in our deck with the same name, because that's something that you don't see in Commander very often, and you definitely don't see it with a sorcery, right? So all these cards like Pyromancer's Ascension, now we can use them and we can really take advantage. So that's more the direction I went with. And I went with the direction of let's actually kill our opponents with Dragon's Approach rather than killing them with big dragons. It's a Spellslinger deck, all right? And it's fun and it's interesting. And I don't have an Izzet deck. I might actually hang on to this one. It's definitely way different than anything any of my decks are doing. And it's pretty darn powerful. It's a little difficult to play. You know, you got to be careful sometimes with some of the things you're doing here because you are exiling cards out of your graveyard, but sometimes you want cards into your graveyard. So you got to be careful with that. I even think you could bump up the power level here quite a bit. You know, you could throw some mana crypts and stuff like that in the deck too and really speed things up. But this is the version that I made. It works really good. It can really win out of nowhere. I also had considered Kaza Royal Chaser as the commander for the deck too because, you know, you can just use it to reduce the cost of your Dragon's Approach, you know, so there is a lot of different ways you can do it, but that is it for today. And that is definitely it for Strixhaven for me. So thanks for tuning in.